I like on occasion to ask business owners, what do people think about the reputation of your organization? Now, I always get an answer to this. Whether or not it's right is something entirely different. But business owners always seem to think that they understand how they're being perceived and the way that they're performing. But when I ask the question a little bit differently, and I say, what does your audience think about your brand? Now that seems to almost be an entirely different question, and it's not. But this one stumps them. And I think the reason that they don't have an answer to this question is because they don't know the answer to this question. What is a brand? Marketing, advertising, branding. These are all some of the most misused, overused, and misunderstood terms, not just in this industry, but every industry. And so what I like to do anytime that there's confusion about a term, I like to start by defining what that term is not. A brand is not a logo. It's not a name. It's not the look that you give your organization. It's not the marketing you use. And it's not the advertising that you choose to take part in. A brand is, quite simply, the way that people feel about your products, your services, and you. You are your brand. The technical definition of a brand, one of the technical definitions of a brand is the result of the experiences and perceptions created by any interaction with or about your company. Now, we've all heard about the P's of marketing, depending on where you got your degree. There's anywhere from 4 to 7 or maybe up to 9 of these. People, products, places, prices, promotions. And those are all well and good, but I would argue that almost anything can affect and become part of your brand. You have word of mouth, the cleanliness of your facilities when you are having visitors, methods of communication that your people use internally and externally, and even the associations and partnerships that you choose to take part in. So before you get too overwhelmed, I understand, everybody understands, you can't control everything. You can't control how people feel. You can, though, to a certain extent, control the experiences that people have with your organization. But why are we talking about any of this? Why is a brand important? What is the value of a strong brand? Well, I have found that you can assess the value of a good brand by looking at some of the most valuable brands and what they've done. I have a few on the board here. So let's just choose one of them, Coca-Cola. Many of you know about that, very valuable brand. Currently stands at about $75 billion, that's with a B, in value. So how much of this organization's value do you think is absorbed in its brand? Would you say 10%? 25? 50? Half of Coca-Cola? It's actually 61%. So for those of you running the numbers in your head, that's a little over $45 billion that you would stand to lose tomorrow if you were to acquire Coca-Cola and then change the name, assuming that you didn't do as good a job in branding as they have over the last century or so. So obviously there's a lot of value associated with a good brand. Some of these things come in the form of trust. Trust in your brand allows you to charge a premium. Apple, for instance, does this all the time. They take $10 to $20 worth of parts, they charge hundreds of dollars for it, and everybody pays because it's Apple. And they know that there's a sense of quality behind that. There's a trust in that brand. There's also faith that comes with a brand. This is known as the halo effect. We were talking about Coca-Cola. How many of you remember New Coke? Coca-Cola would like for you to not remember New Coke, but many of us do. We still buy Coca-Cola. That's because of the halo effect. And of course, it goes without saying that knowledge in your brand gives you access to a wider audience. But why are we talking about brands? This is usually the part of the presentation where people check the agenda. I thought this was supposed to be about getting new leads and marketing and advertising. Well, it is, but there's a good answer to why we're talking about brands first. There's a quote actually from my dad that I grew up hearing constantly. He said, "Son, the quickest, cheapest way to do things is to do it right the first time." I have many customers that come to me, they just want to jump right to the end. They want to jump to that part where we're starting to make really good messaging, we're getting the word out, we're putting content on the website, and I have to back up because there are a couple of questions I like to ask first. I like to ask, who are you? What do you do? And for whom do you do it? This is very simple stuff. Every organization should be able to answer these questions, but it's telling for me because the answer to the first is what they believe to be their brand. Second, what do you do? This is a list of their products and services. For whom do you do it? That is their audience, or their perceived audience at the time. Now I take all three of these answers and I put it into the form of a document that I have found to be so valuable. And we're going to talk about this a lot, so remember, it's called the matrix. I put the audience demographics across the top, and I put their services and or products along the side. And this document, this matrix, becomes a definition of everything that is the organization. And the reason that it's so valuable to a marketing guy like me is because now X marks the spot. Every one of these X's within this document now represents a piece of content that we need to think about beginning to generate right away. So the next question, how do I go about making marketing content? Well, I have a few rules on that. I tell customers that we should always be saying things with our marketing that is interesting, relevant, provocative, and educational. You'll note I did not say or, it is and. All four of these components have to be part of every single piece that we put together. And the reason for that is because things that are interesting tend to be intriguing. Things that are relevant become relatable. Things that are provocative tend to inspire engagement. And everybody values something that is educational. So what do we have, all of us, in our experience that embodies all of these terms? Interesting, relatable, provocative, educational. We've all experienced something like this. We just don't think about it at first. Stories. All good stories embody most of these things. That's why we tend to remember them. And all good stories tend to start the same way. Once upon a time. Once upon a time. I always loved hearing this when I was a kid. I didn't always know it was on the other side of that, but I knew I wanted to hear more. I wanted to hear what came next. I wanted to turn that page. So how can we take a term like once upon a time and translate it into something that we can use in our business, marketing, and communications? Let's try this. We've made some changes, and we can't keep it to ourselves anymore. What you've heard is true. It's not bad. Let's go ahead and give it a cover, as all good stories do. Let's invite them to turn the page. In the biz, we call this a call to action. And just so that they don't forget who's telling this story, let's go ahead and put in our logo. All right, so what do we have here? Yeah, we have an ad. This is an ad. This is a social media post. This is a usable web banner. It's an email graphic. That one throws people off. We'll come back to that one in a second. But just so you can see, this is how this looks translated as a social media post. This is how it looks as a print ad. And then the reason that sometimes people are thrown off when I say that this also works as an email graphic, most people are used to seeing walls of text, just a couple of sporadic clip art pieces in there, maybe a logo at the top. But when they see this, that's not what emails look like. Well, this is what my emails look like. This is what my clients' emails look like. And these all work for every one of them. Let's talk about why and how. So the premise is very simple. People get this. What you're seeing here is actually what they see in their inbox as an email. If I've done my job right, they will want to click through to what becomes the website. That's the turning of the page. This is vitally important. Your website represents your office on the internet. This is where you control the environment. This is where, even if they come and they're not as interested as maybe they thought they were originally, you've got them where you need them to be. They're surrounded by your website's navigation system, the other related links. They can stay here and continue absorbing content about you and your organization. But why use email and digital marketing anyway? Well, there are a couple of reasons. Number one, you're meeting people where they are. Anybody guess, or would like to take a guess, at what Nielsen says up to 59% of people do when the television commercials come on? Yeah, they're checking their phone. They're checking email. They're checking social media. Much to the annoyance and frustration, I imagine, of the guy that bought the television commercial. Now, that's not to say that television and radio and print don't still have their place. All of this is supplemental. But there are two major components to marketing. One is exposure. Eyeballs. Just people seeing and being exposed to your brand. But the other side of marketing is engagement. And that is so hard to track. It can be done, but it's not as easy when it comes to traditional marketing. So the second reason to use digital marketing is automation, tracking, and analytics. Now, this is some fun stuff because from a marketing perspective, this is where the real fun starts, where we can actually track not only the amount of exposure, but the level of engagement to that exposure. And the tools we use to do that start with CRM. How many of you are actively using CRM or could name the CRM system that you're using? That's good. You just made your marketing department proud. It's probably one of these 10. This is the top 10 CRMs currently in use. And for those who don't know, a CRM is a database of current and prospective customers that allows you to track the relationship and follow through on all of the tasks associated with those customers. The second tool we use is something called an automation system. If you use an automation system, it's probably up on the screen right now. For those who don't know, an automation system is a content management and communication distribution tool that communicates with the CRM and allows you to send out your messaging. So, I told you earlier to remember the matrix. Told you it was very important. We're coming back around to it now, okay? The matrix combined with CRM and an automation system gives you something that we in the biz call segmentation. This is a beautiful word to marketers, because you're able to, instead of sending a scatter shot with your messaging, you can use more of a sniper, a narrow approach to sending your messaging. So, at this point I have people that often say, this is a little overwhelming, it's too much, I really wanted to start this, but this segmentation thing, I have 10,000 names in my database, I can't get to segmenting all of that, so I don't know that this is going to be usable unless there's a way to automate all of this. Well, good news for you, because there is, and I'm going to tell you how to do it. So, by combining our CRM with our automation system, we can begin to send out messages based on the matrix that we predefined about your organization. And suddenly we send out messages tagged with the very things that you said you were. So an email goes out, and it's linked to a website or a page of content on your website. If opened, if there's any engagement at all, that engagement is tracked at the level of interest, history, and activity per each one of your contacts. That information generates what's known as a lead score. That lead score goes back up into your automation system, is then translated with your CRM system, and customers will begin to paint their own picture of themselves for you. And that segmentation process takes care of itself. Now, if people are to click on the email, that goes through as a further level of engagement. It raises their lead score, and it is also tracked back through the automation system and the CRM. It also generates what's known as leads, which actually initiates what's known as a formal sales funnel activity, but that's an entirely different presentation. So all of this engagement is tracked and can begin to segment your lists for you. So the next question, how often should I send content? Well, I'm going to answer this two different ways. One here, I'll say, historically, we have found that 2 to 3 times a month is enough to continue engaging with your customers and staying in front of them with your messaging. Too much more than that, you begin to have recipient apathy, or worse, people will begin to unsubscribe. Now, I'm going to circle back around because things have changed a little bit in the last, 2 or 3 months. So how do I plan a content calendar? That's usually the next question. My answer is you use the industry and all of the resources that are currently available to you. And what do I mean by that? Well, how many of you knew that you could get an editorial calendar from major media and publication organizations for free? All you have to do is say you're going to do an ad. No, that's mean. Don't do that unless you're really going to run an ad. But they'll give it to you for free. You can get an editorial calendar absolutely for free with any organization that you're currently communicating with. Now, why is that of any value to you? All of these major organizations spend tens of, possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars doing research on the ebb and flow of the buying cycle within your industry to determine what is and is not apropos for those months throughout the calendar year. That allows you to piggyback on that information, and suddenly you're able to begin laying out a calendar of all of your print deadlines, your print topics, your publication topics. You can create your webinar calendar, you can create your ad placement calendar, and even your blog and email topic calendar throughout the year. A major publication later in the year will have some big topic, big title, and all of a sudden you're right in line with it. You look very engaged with your industry. Now, you can make all the plans you want, but there's a quote I just found recently from Mike Tyson. It says, "Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face." We've all been punched in the face pretty hard the last couple of months. And this goes back to what I was alluding to earlier about historical rules versus what's happened recently. What we found is that COVID kind of changed everything. People being from home, the rules have shifted a bit. Whereas we used to see people that didn't want to receive messages more than maybe 2 or 3 times a month, people are opening everything. We've seen rates increase on opens and click-throughs. So what I wanted to do was start with a case study with a client of mine. They do bioanalytical testing. They're here in the Midwest. And everybody got a little scared when this started. Nobody really knew what was going to happen next. And so we knew that we wanted to test the waters with some messaging. We put out one from their leadership team just addressing COVID, saying, we understand this may change things. We're right here with you. We don't want to act as though we know we have some crystal ball and can see the future, but we will be right here with you for this. That company was determined to be an essential organization because of their involvement with bioanalytical testing. So we went ahead and put out another message that said, we're going to keep on trucking and so will your projects. That message was also well received. So we immediately followed it up with another message, another email, saying, or asking the question, how can we help with your COVID projects? And what we were finding was everybody was receiving these extremely well, whereas the industry average prior to COVID was 15 to 20% on opens and 2 to 3% on click-through. We were seeing 25 to 35% open rates and 5 to 9% on click-throughs. So we went ahead and kept pushing it. We went from sending 2 to 3 emails per month to 2 to 3 per week. And all of them continued being well received. And we even went ahead and started signing up for additional webinars. We already had webinars as part of our package, part of our plan for the year, but we added about 2 or 3 and started listing them immediately, with some as little as 2 or 3 week promotion time. And they were still being well received. So we even went ahead and started a podcast. We started 2-minute videos every Tuesday. We call them 2-Minute Tuesdays. And every one of these have been better received than any message that we had spaced out historically. So again, to end on another quote, there's one from Leo Babauta, says, "Stick to the plan, especially when you have to change it." To wrap up everything that we've kind of talked about in terms of the way that you can conduct your marketing, we know when we're going to be using a marketing calendar based on an industry forecast. We know what we're going to be putting out. We're going to be using topics based on info from the company matrix that we created. We know how we're going to be doing it. We're going to be sending emails, webinars, social media, and even some traditional media like ad placements. We know to whom we're going to be sending. We're going to be using the audience that is segmented using our CRM and our automation system. But we haven't yet answered the question of who. Who is going to be responsible for all of this content? Who's going to be creating all of this content? An organization like mine can help you formulate the plan and put elements together, but ultimately, the person who's going to be in charge and responsible of creating the core of this content is you. Nobody knows your business better than you. You never want to hand over the keys of the kingdom, your organization, to somebody that doesn't have the background that you have with your industry. Your experts are your value. You should show them off. This positions you as a subject matter expert within the industry. By you creating the content, all of your people become invested and they feel in the loop about all of this content because they helped create it. So to wrap up, you are the owner of your brand. Cicada will make you proud of it.